Let's hit record. Let's see if it works. All right. When you have a negative number inside of a radical, you're going to get rejected on the calculator. So look, if I put in what's the square root of negative 4, I get math error. Okay, if I try what's the square root of negative 9, what's the square root of negative 9, I get math error. If you put it in your phone, right? So you're going to get rejected. It doesn't mean it's not solvable. It is. What it is that you're going into imaginary numbers, which we then go into complex numbers on Monday. Okay? All right. Here's what it is. Imaginary numbers is the little I. Some of you kind of give it a little tail, like a mermaid tail, like cursive, whatever. You can make it, but it's lowercase I. Okay? All right, so what's the square root of negative 4? You guys should know your multiplication of radicals, your property. So the square root of negative 4, I can separate the negative from the 4. So the square root of negative 1 times the square root of 4. Sorry, my throat. Okay, the square root of 4 is 2. Guys in the corner. The square root of 4 is 2. What is the square root of negative 1? This is your I. That's your imaginary. So this is the new part. You're going to replace that square root of negative 1, and it's going to become the little lowercase I. So we're not in real numbers anymore. We're in imaginary numbers. So what's the square root of negative 4? Well, the square root of negative 1 is I. The square root of 4 is 2. So this is equivalent to 2I. What's the square root of negative 9? Well, the square root of 9 is 3. The square root of negative 1 is I. So it's 3I. So whenever you have a negative radical or negative radicand inside the radical, you produce an I. That's how it exists. That's it. So if we go to the worksheet, yeah? Okay, if I go to the worksheet and we jump to this one, negative 1, rad 36, this gives me the I, this gives me the 6, and so it's 6I. Spam risk. Let's delete that. Okay, so it's just 6I. That's it. Do another one? Okay, so if I go into negative 147, you already know you're just going to produce an I. You just have to find out what the square root of 147 is. So it's what's square root of negative 1 times the square root of 147. This is my I. What's the square root of 147? 7 rad 3. Okay, now here I'm going to write big. This is like kind of not ideal. It's not that it's wrong. I'm going to write really big though so you guys can see. Okay, so the square root of negative 147, if you were to put this in the calculator, you'd get this in the calculator, and then you know that negative becomes the I. Okay, later on, not now, later on, we're going to really go over the I should really be after the integer before the radical, because students tend to be sloppy, and with that sloppiness, if you were to extend the radical and cover over the I would dock you. Any little bit of that radical house roof that's going over the I, you're gonna get docked. Okay, so that's why the rule is don't put it in the back, put it after the integer in front of the radical, and that way it's always safe, it's always well communicated that you understand the I is not in the radical. And so in textbooks everywhere, you'll always see it there. You won't ever see it in the back because we don't want this. This is very, very bad. Yeah? Yeah. Okay, so why can't I? Oh, there's the mouse.